The mining colony stretched across a desolate planet's surface like an open wound, a testament to generations of systematic oppression. Harsh metallic structures jutted from rocky terrain, casting long shadows under the dim light of 3 distant suns. Massive processing facilities hummed with a constant, soul-crushing rhythm that had become the heartbeat of human existence for over a century. Sarah Chen moved with practiced precision, her movements synchronized with the industrial machinery surrounding her. Sweat beaded on her forehead, quickly evaporating in the hot, recycled air of the processing chamber. To the alien overseers, she was nothing more than a unit of labor, a replaceable component in their vast economic machine. But Sarah was something more, something they could never understand. Her hands, calloused from years of work, moved with a subtle intelligence that went far beyond mere mechanical operation. Where others saw routine maintenance, she saw intricate systems waiting to be understood. Each piece of equipment told a story, and Sarah had become fluent in its language. The neural suppression collar around her neck pulsed with a soft blue light, a constant reminder of the control mechanisms that had kept her species subdued for generations. These devices were supposed to limit independent thought, to reduce humans to nothing more than efficient workers. But Sarah had discovered something the alien engineers never anticipated. The human mind was far more adaptable than any technological constraint. Years of repetitive work had become an unexpected training ground. While the alien overseers believed they were breaking human spirit, they were actually creating something far more dangerous, a collective intelligence born of survival and hidden resistance. Sarah's section controlled the primary titanium extraction and refinement process for this entire sector. Millions of tons of raw material passed through her workstation daily, each piece carefully tracked, processed, and documented. To any casual observer, she was simply following established protocols. But her mind was always working, always analyzing. Today was different. A microscopic inconsistency in the neural suppression grid caught her attention, a tiny fluctuation that most would have overlooked. Most workers were too exhausted, too beaten down to notice such subtle details, but Sarah had learned to see beyond the obvious. The suppression grid worked by creating a constant low-frequency signal that disrupted complex thought patterns. It was designed to make humans compliant, to reduce them to efficient but unquestioning laborers. But every system had its weakness, and Sarah had just found a critical vulnerability. Her eyes flickered briefly to the monitoring stations. The alien supervisors, tall and insectoid, moved with their typical mechanical precision. Their exoskeletons gleamed under the industrial lighting, a sharp contrast to the worn human workers. They believed their technology was infallible, their control absolute. They were wrong. The inconsistency Sarah discovered was more than just a technical glitch. It was a potential pathway, a microscopic crack in the seemingly impenetrable wall of oppression. Years of careful observation, of subtle learning, had prepared her for this moment. Her fingers moved almost imperceptibly, logging the discovery in a way that would appear completely routine to any monitoring system. Years of survival had taught her the art of invisibility, of existing just beneath the surface of detection. Outside the processing facility, the planet's landscape told a story of endless extraction. Massive mining rigs stretched to the horizon, drilling deep into the planet's crust. Humans had been brought here generations ago, promised opportunity, and instead finding endless labor. Each generation had been born into this system, their dreams crushed under the weight of alien economic machinery. But something was changing, something they could not predict. Sarah allowed herself the briefest moment of a smile, so quick that the neural suppressors wouldn't even register the emotional spike. She had found a way, a tiny, almost imperceptible way, but a way nonetheless. The first step towards freedom was always understanding the system that confined you. And humanity was about to show the universe exactly what they were capable of understanding. The communication network emerged not with a thunderous declaration, but with the subtlety of a whispered breath. Dr. Marcus Rodriguez understood that true resistance was an art of precision, of careful manipulation hidden within the most mundane of systems. Deep within the industrial complex, communication was supposed to be impossible. The alien overseers had designed an intricate surveillance system that monitored every possible channel of human interaction. Verbal communication was strictly regulated, digital exchanges were impossible, and any form of collective organizing was brutally suppressed. But humans had always been masters of unspoken communication. Marcus worked in the Central Data Processing Hub, a position that gave him unprecedented access to the colony's communication infrastructure. To the alien supervisors, he was just another data technician, processing endless streams of raw material extraction reports. What they didn't realize was that each report was becoming something more. A complex code, a silent language of resistance. The breakthrough came from an unexpected combination of quantum physics and human creativity. Marcus had spent years studying the quantum entanglement principles that the aliens used in their communication systems. Where they saw a rigid, controlled network, he saw possibility. His fingers moved with practiced precision across the holographic interface. To any observer, he was simply running routine diagnostics. But each keystroke was carefully calculated, each data packet a potential carrier of hidden information. The quantum communication method he developed was brilliant in its simplicity. By exploiting the microscopic gaps in the surveillance algorithms, he created a communication network that was essentially invisible. Information could be passed in the tiniest fluctuations of data streams, so subtle that no monitoring system could detect it. Workers across the mining colony began to receive fragments of information. A maintenance log would contain an extra decimal point. A processing report would have an imperceptibly different spacing. To the untrained eye, these were meaningless variations, but to those who knew how to look, they were messages of hope. Sarah Chen's discovery in the neural suppression grid became the first major breakthrough. Marcus carefully wove her findings into a broader network of information, spreading the knowledge across multiple work sectors. Each worker who received a fragment understood only a small part of the larger picture, but that was by design. The alien overseers prided themselves on their technological superiority. Their surveillance systems were considered the most advanced in the known galaxy. They had subjugated entire civilizations, crushed countless rebellions. Their control was absolute, or so they believed. What they failed to understand was the human capacity for adaptation. Each system of control created its own weaknesses, and humans had an uncanny ability to find and exploit those weaknesses. Marcus remembered the stories his grandmother told him, tales of resistance movements from Earth's history, how people had communicated under the most oppressive conditions, finding ways to share information that seemed impossible. Those stories had been more than just history. They were a blueprint for survival. The communication network grew organically, like a living system. Workers in the titanium refinement sector would share subtle signals during shift changes. A specific way of arranging tools, a particular pattern of movement, seemingly random, but each action carried meaning for those who understood the code. Young technicians became the network's most valuable assets. Raised entirely under alien control, they had developed an intuitive understanding of the systems that control them. Where older workers saw insurmountable obstacles, these young minds saw puzzles waiting to be solved. Marcus knew that information was the most powerful weapon. Not brute force, not violent rebellion, but the quiet, persistent spread of knowledge. Each worker who understood their true potential was a node in a growing network of resistance. By the time the alien supervisors might have suspected something, the network would be too complex to dismantle. It was distributed, decentralized, living in the spaces between official communication channels. The first true message of resistance spread slowly, carefully. Not a call to arms, but a simple statement of potential. We are more than they believe. Outside the processing facility, the planet continued its endless cycle of extraction. Massive machines continued to drill. Workers continued to move with practiced efficiency. To any casual observer, nothing had changed. But something fundamental was shifting. A quiet revolution was beginning, one data point at a time. Innovation rarely announces itself with fanfare. It creeps in quietly, born from necessity and human ingenuity. In the depths of the mining colony's maintenance workshop, a group of young technicians gathered during their brief rest period. To the alien supervisors, it looked like a routine maintenance briefing. But something extraordinary was taking shape. Elena Martinez stood at the center of the group, her hands moving quickly as she sketched out complex diagrams on a worn-down holographic interface. Her eyes burned with an intensity that belied the monotonous work they were forced to perform. Where others saw broken equipment, Elena saw potential. The workshop was a graveyard of alien technology, discarded components, damaged machinery, and obsolete systems that the overseers had deemed worthless. But in the hands of these human technicians, these components were becoming something entirely new. "Look here," Elena whispered, pointing to a complex circuit board. What had once been part of a mining drone's guidance system was now being reimagined. The alien technology was precise but rigid. Human creativity could make it something more. David Chen, a young engineer with a reputation for unconventional thinking, had already modified several pieces of equipment. A damaged communication relay had been transformed into a signal amplifier. A broken environmental control unit now served as a sophisticated power distribution network. The alien overseers operated on a principle of absolute specialization. Each piece of technology had a single predetermined purpose. Repair meant replacement, not reimagination. They could not comprehend the human ability to see potential beyond original design. Elena's latest project was their most ambitious yet. By combining fragments of neural interface technology with discarded mining equipment, she was creating something unprecedented. A device that could temporarily disrupt the neural suppression systems, not destroy them, but create momentary windows of uncontrolled thought. "It's not about destroying their technology," Elena explained to her colleagues. "It's about understanding it so completely that we can use it against them." The workshop became a secret laboratory of human potential. Each discarded component told a story. Each broken system was an opportunity to learn, to adapt, to overcome. The technicians worked with a precision that would have impressed their alien masters had they understood what was truly happening. David's modifications to the environmental control systems were particularly ingenious. By subtly adjusting atmospheric composition and temperature gradients, they could create small zones of reduced surveillance, tiny pockets of relative freedom, invisible to the monitoring systems. Their work was dangerous. Discovery would mean immediate termination, or something far worse. The alien overseers were not known for mercy, but the risk was worth it. With each modified device, with each reimagined system, they were building something more than just tools. They were building hope. The communication network developed by Marcus Rodriguez provided critical support. Information about technological weaknesses, about potential modification points, spread through the subtle quantum communication channels. What began in one workshop was slowly becoming a colony-wide effort of technological resistance. Young workers from different sectors began to contribute. A maintenance technician in the resource processing unit discovered a way to modify extraction equipment to be marginally less efficient, not enough to raise suspicion, but enough to slowly undermine the colony's economic output. Another group found ways to subtly redirect power systems, creating small reserves of energy that could be used for their growing resistance. Elena understood that their strength lay not in direct confrontation, but in adaptation. The alien technology was a complex system, and every system had its weaknesses. Human creativity was the ultimate exploit. As the rest period ended, the technicians carefully restored the workshop to its original state. To any observer, nothing had changed. The discarded components remained exactly where they had been. The holographic interfaces showed nothing unusual. But something fundamental had shifted. The aliens believed they controlled every aspect of human existence. They monitored every communication, regulated every movement, suppressed every independent thought. They were wrong. Humanity was about to show them exactly how wrong they could be. The first strike began not with weapons, but with silence. Across the mining colony, Systems started to falter in ways that defied predictability. Power grids flickered with microscopic irregularities. Communication channels developed subtle, almost imperceptible disruptions. Transportation networks experienced momentary, unexplainable hesitations. Commander Zarakil, the primary overseer of the human mining sectors, studied the initial reports with growing unease. Her crystalline exoskeleton reflected the harsh industrial lighting as her multiple eyes scanned the data streams. Something was fundamentally wrong, but the wrongness existed in a realm just beyond definitive explanation. The human workers moved with their usual mechanical precision. Nothing in their behavior suggested anything unusual, yet the systems around them were slowly, systematically coming apart at the seams. Marcus Rodriguez had orchestrated the plan with mathematical precision. Each technological interruption was carefully calculated, not enough to trigger an immediate full-scale response, but sufficient to create cascading uncertainty. The quantum communication network he had developed became the nervous system of their resistance, transmitting micro-instructions that seemed random but were anything but. In the maintenance workshops, Alina Martinez and her team of young technicians watched with carefully contained excitement. Their months of preparation, their countless hours of studying alien technologies, were now bearing fruit. Each modified circuit, each reimagined piece of equipment, was a weapon more powerful than any traditional armament. The alien control systems were designed with absolute rigidity. They worked on principles of predictability, of total surveillance and immediate correction. But human creativity introduced an element they could not comprehend: intentional unpredictability. Power redistribution happened in millisecond fluctuations. Communication channels developed momentary blind spots. Equipment responded with split-second delays that were just long enough to create confusion, but too brief to be definitively identified as sabotage. Workers across different sectors began to move with a synchronized subtlety that defied their supposed individual limitations. A maintenance team in the mineral processing unit would adjust a valve with microscopic precision. Another group in the atmospheric control center would redirect airflow by almost imperceptible degrees. The aliens prided themselves on their technological superiority. Their surveillance systems were considered the most advanced in the known galaxy. They had subjugated entire civilizations, crushed countless rebellions with swift, brutal efficiency. But they had never encountered human adaptability. Sarah Chen's initial discovery of the neural suppression grid vulnerability now bore its most profound fruit. The communication network Marcus had developed allowed for a level of coordination that was completely alien to the hierarchical alien society. Each human worker became a node in a living, breathing system of resistance. Commander Zarakil's frustration grew with each passing hour. The reports defied logical analysis. Statistical anomalies appeared and disappeared with no discernible pattern. Her subordinates reported nothing unusual, yet the entire colonial infrastructure seemed to be developing microscopic failures. What the alien overseers failed to understand was the human capacity for collective action. Where their society valued individual control, humans found strength in subtle cooperation. Each small action, each microscopic adjustment, was part of a larger, almost organic strategy. The transportation networks were the first to show significant disruption. Cargo ships experienced unexplainable navigation errors. Mining vehicles moved with slight but consistent inefficiencies. Robotic systems developed momentary processing hesitations that were just long enough to reduce overall productivity. By the time the alien leadership recognized the true nature of the disruption, it would be too late. The uprising was not a single moment of violent rebellion. It was a systematic, carefully orchestrated dismantling of control. Each human worker had become a silent revolutionary, their very existence a form of resistance. As the first solar cycle of the disruption came to a close, the mining colony hung in a state of controlled chaos. To any external observer, nothing seemed fundamentally wrong, but something profound had changed. The humans were no longer just workers. They were architects of their own liberation. The conflict escalated with a precision that defied conventional understanding of warfare. Humanity's approach was nothing like the traditional military strategies the galactic powers had encountered before. Where other civilizations relied on massive fleet deployments and direct confrontations, humans transformed warfare into an art of adaptive complexity. Admiral Elena Rodriguez stood in the makeshift command center, a converted mining facility that bore little resemblance to traditional military installations. Her team was a diverse group of individuals. Former miners, engineers, communication specialists, each bringing a unique perspective to their resistance. They expect predictability. Elena explained to her core team. We'll give them chaos. The first major engagement demonstrated their revolutionary approach. Instead of concentrating forces, human resistance cells operated as a distributed network. Each group became a living, breathing system that could adapt, reconfigure, and respond with lightning speed. Stolen alien transportation vessels were modified beyond recognition. Mining equipment became sophisticated combat platforms. Communication systems were transformed into sophisticated warfare networks that could overwhelm and confuse enemy tracking mechanisms. The alien military command struggled to comprehend their opponents. Traditional warfare doctrine relied on hierarchical structures, predictable chain of command, and clearly defined battle lines. The human resistance moved like a fluid organism, with no central point of vulnerability. Marcus Chen had developed a communication strategy that was revolutionary. Using quantum entanglement principles and the neural network they had initially created to bypass suppression systems, they could coordinate actions across vast distances instantaneously. Each resistance cell could receive and act on information faster than any centralized command could respond. Young technicians who had spent years maintaining alien machinery now understood those systems better than their creators. They could predict system responses, create targeted vulnerabilities, and exploit technological weaknesses with surgical precision. The galactic conflict became a complex dance of technological adaptation, where alien military strategists expected massive fleet confrontations. Humans introduced warfare as a multi-dimensional problem-solving exercise. They attacked infrastructure, communication networks, and logistical systems with a creativity that defied traditional military understanding. Stolen alien vessels were not just repurposed, they were completely reimagined. A mining transport could become a sophisticated electronic warfare platform. A resource extraction drone could be transformed into a precision infiltration unit. Nothing was as it seemed. Elena's strategy focused on asymmetrical engagement. They avoided direct confrontations where the aliens held technological superiority. Instead, they created complex scenarios that forced the alien military to expend resources in ways that gradually weakened their overall position. Communication interception became an art form. Marcus's team could not just listen to alien communication networks, they could manipulate them. False signals, redirected information streams, subtle disinformation campaigns that created uncertainty and confusion. The alien leadership began to realize they were facing something unprecedented. This was not a traditional rebellion. This was a fundamental reimagining of conflict itself. Each resistance cell operated with a level of autonomy that seemed chaotic, but was actually highly coordinated. They could receive broad strategic objectives and then develop their own tactics to achieve those goals. No single point of failure existed in their network. Young humans who had been considered nothing more than labor were now demonstrating strategic capabilities that challenged everything the alien civilization understood about warfare, intelligence, and adaptability. Resource extraction facilities became launch points for sophisticated infiltration missions. Communication networks transformed into intelligence-gathering platforms. Every system the aliens had used to control humans was now being used against them. The most powerful weapon was not an advanced weapon system or a massive fleet. It was the human capacity to learn, to adapt, to see potential where others saw only limitations. As the conflict spread across multiple star systems, other subjugated species began to take notice. The humans were not just fighting for themselves, they were showing everyone that resistance was possible. The galactic powers watched in growing concern and unexpected admiration. What had been considered a simple labor species was revealing itself to be something far more complex, far more dangerous. Humanity was rewriting the rules of engagement, one impossible victory at a time. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood before the most complex device ever created by human hands. It was not a weapon of destruction, but an instrument of profound connection. A neural communication array that would change everything about how sentient beings understood each other. The psychological warfare they were about to unleash was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. Where traditional conflict relied on physical force, humans were about to demonstrate the true power of shared experience. The neural broadcast device was a marvel of interdisciplinary innovation. Quantum communication principles merged with advanced neurological mapping, creating a technology that could transmit not just information, but lived experience. Emotions, memories, the very essence of consciousness could now be shared across entire star systems. Marcus Chen carefully calibrated the final components. Years of studying the alien suppression technologies had taught them something crucial. Control was most effective when it isolated populations, when it prevented true understanding. Their device would do the opposite. The first test transmission began with a memory from Sarah Chen, one of the first to discover the weakness in the neural suppression grid. It was a simple moment. A childhood memory of her grandmother's garden on Earth, long before the alien occupation. The warmth of sunlight, the smell of fresh soil, the feeling of hope that seemed to have been forgotten. But it was more than just a memory. It was a precisely engineered psychological weapon. As the transmission spread, something extraordinary happened. The memory carried with it not just visual and sensory information, but the deep emotional context. Other enslaved workers across different colonies began to experience the memory as if it were their own. The sense of connection, of shared humanity, spread like a living network. The alien leadership had built their entire societal structure on separation. Each species was carefully categorized, controlled, and isolated. They understood technological control, but they had no concept of emotional resonance. Humans were about to teach them a fundamental lesson. Each subsequent transmission became more sophisticated. Memories of resistance, of small victories, of unbroken human spirit began to circulate. Workers who had never met found themselves connected by shared experiences, by a collective understanding that transcended physical boundaries. The psychological impact was immediate and profound. Enslaved populations across multiple star systems began to see themselves differently. They were no longer isolated units of labor, but part of a larger, living network of resistance. Marcus understood the true power of their approach. It wasn't about violent rebellion. It was about reconnection, about reminding enslaved populations of their inherent dignity, their capacity for hope. Alien monitoring systems were powerless against this new form of communication. Traditional surveillance could track physical movements, could suppress verbal communication. But how do you control shared experience? How do you monitor the transmission of hope? Elena had designed the neural broadcast with multiple layers of complexity. Each transmission was a carefully crafted mosaic of human experience. Moments of struggle, of resilience, of unexpected joy. The kind of experiences that could not be quantified or controlled. The first signs of the transmission's impact came from unexpected places. Workers in distant mining colonies began to move differently. Their productivity remained the same, but something fundamental had changed in their collective consciousness. Alien supervisors reported increased instances of what they termed psychological irregularities. Workers demonstrated unprecedented levels of collective coordination. Communication patterns became more complex, more nuanced. What the aliens failed to understand was that they were witnessing the awakening of a collective consciousness. The neural broadcast was more than a communication technology. It was a liberation tool. Each transmission carried the core of human experience. The ability to hope, to dream, to imagine something beyond current circumstances. As the transmissions continued, something remarkable began to happen. Other enslaved species started to tune into the human frequency. They began to share their own experiences, their own moments of resilience. A network of hope was forming, one memory at a time. The galaxy was about to change, and it would start with a simple, powerful truth. No one is truly alone. The final battle would not be fought with traditional weapons. It would be a conflict of imagination, of possibility, of fundamental understanding. Admiral Elena Rodriguez stood on the bridge of a repurposed mining vessel, her command team a diverse collection of individuals who represented the true strength of human resistance. Around them, a fleet unlike any the galaxy had ever seen assembled, a motley collection of modified extraction ships, communication vessels, and liberated transport platforms. The alien homeworld loomed before them, a massive planetary installation that represented centuries of galactic domination. Its surface was a complex network of control systems, each designed to maintain absolute power over countless subjugated species. They would change everything. Marcus Chen's communication network had been working for months, slowly infiltrating the planet's complex defense systems. What appeared to be routine maintenance signals were actually sophisticated infiltration protocols. Each system was being subtly prepared for the ultimate disruption. The alien leadership believed in absolute control. Their technological superiority had allowed them to subjugate entire civilizations with clinical precision. They had developed technologies that could suppress independent thought, control resource distribution, and maintain total surveillance. They had never encountered human creativity. The first wave of the assault was almost invisible. Microscopic technological modifications began to cascade through the planetary defense systems. Communication networks developed unexpected vulnerabilities. Power distribution systems started to fluctuate in ways that defied predictable analysis. Elena's strategy was brilliant in its complexity. They would not destroy the planetary infrastructure. They would transform it. Modified mining drones became precision infiltration units. Communication relays transformed into sophisticated network disruptors. Every piece of technology the aliens had used to control others was now being used against them. The planetary defense grid began to experience its first critical failures. Not through direct attack, but through a complex series of technological manipulations that made traditional defensive responses impossible. Each system's attempt to correct itself only created more vulnerability. Sarah Chen led a specialized team that had spent years studying the alien technological infrastructure. They understood these systems better than their original creators. Where the aliens saw rigid technological structures, humans saw complex puzzles waiting to be solved. The psychological broadcasts developed earlier proved to be a critical component of their strategy. As the technological disruption began, workers and subjugated populations across the planet began to experience something unprecedented. A collective awakening of possibility. Alien command structures began to break down in ways that defied traditional understanding. Their hierarchical system, which had been their greatest strength, became their most significant vulnerability. Each attempt to centralize control only created more points of potential failure. Marcus's communication network transformed the conflict into a multi-dimensional problem-solving exercise. Traditional military engagement became irrelevant. This was warfare as a form of collective imagination. The alien leadership watched in growing horror as their most sophisticated systems began to respond in ways they could not predict. Defensive protocols created more vulnerability. Attempts to reassert control only demonstrated their fundamental lack of understanding. Humans had spent generations being underestimated. Now they would show the galaxy what that truly meant. The final stage of the assault was not about destruction. It was about liberation. Each technological modification, each carefully crafted infiltration protocol, was designed to create pathways to freedom for all subjugated populations. As the planetary systems began to falter, something extraordinary happened. Other enslaved species, who had been watching the human resistance, began to find their own paths to liberation. The human approach had shown them that resistance was possible. Elena understood that this was about more than defeating an oppressive system. It was about creating a new way of understanding collective potential. The alien homeworld systems began to reconfigure themselves, not through external attack, but through a fundamental reimagining of their own infrastructure. The very technologies of control were being transformed into technologies of liberation. In the final moments of the confrontation, the alien leadership realized the true nature of their defeat. This was not a military victory. This was a complete transformation of understanding. Humanity had not just won a war. They had reimagined the very concept of conflict. The transformation of galactic civilization happened not with a single dramatic moment, but through a series of profound reimaginings. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood before the newly formed Galactic Cooperative Council, representing a vision that was radically different from any previous political structure. The chamber was filled with representatives from species that had once been subjugated, now working together as true equals. The old systems of control had collapsed, but what emerged was not chaos. It was a delicate, complex network of mutual understanding and collective potential. Marcus Chen worked alongside her, helping to design communication systems that would prevent the kind of systematic oppression they had fought against. Their approach was fundamentally different from previous galactic governance models. Instead of centralized control, they created adaptive, responsive networks that prioritized individual and collective well-being. The liberation had revealed something profound about sentient existence. No single species had all the answers. True progress came from collaboration, from understanding, from recognizing the unique potential of every collective intelligence. Sarah Chen led the technological reconstruction efforts. The massive industrial complexes that had once been tools of oppression were being transformed. Mining facilities became centers of scientific research. Communication networks became platforms for cultural exchange. Every system was being reimagined with a focus on growth, understanding, and mutual development. The human approach to governance was unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Traditional political structures relied on rigid hierarchies, on systems of control and domination. Humans introduced a model of governance that was fluid, adaptive, and fundamentally collaborative. Education became a primary focus. Not just technical training, but a comprehensive approach to understanding. Young beings from different species learned together, sharing experiences, developing empathy, and collective problem-solving skills. The psychological broadcast technologies developed during the Resistance became tools of unprecedented cultural exchange. Species could share experiences, understand each other's perspectives in ways that had never been possible before. Conflict resolution became a matter of genuine understanding, not military might. Economic systems were completely reimagined. Resources were no longer seen as something to be extracted and controlled, but as collaborative opportunities for mutual development. Each species brought its unique capabilities to a galactic network of innovation and shared progress. The former alien overlords were not destroyed or completely removed. Instead, they were integrated into the new system, given opportunities to understand the fundamental error of their previous approach. Rehabilitation became more important than punishment. Marcus developed communication protocols that made systematic oppression virtually impossible. Multiple layers of oversight, transparent decision-making processes, and adaptive governance models ensured that no single group could consolidate absolute power. Scientific research took on a new dimension. Instead of competitive development, species began to share research, collaborate on complex challenges, and recognize that collective intelligence was far more powerful than isolated achievement. Elena understood that their greatest victory was not military. It was philosophical. They had demonstrated that sentient beings could choose cooperation over control, understanding over domination. The young generations across the galaxy grew up with a fundamentally different worldview. They learned about the Resistance not as a violent uprising, but as a profound reimagining of collective potential. Education systems emphasized empathy, collaborative problem-solving, and the recognition of individual and collective worth. Technological development became a collaborative process. Each species contributed its unique perspective, its distinctive approach to problem-solving. The galactic research networks became something truly extraordinary, a living, breathing system of collective intelligence. The human approach to conflict resolution became a model for other species. Problems were not solved through force, but through comprehensive understanding. Communication, empathy, and collaborative problem-solving became the primary tools of governance. Agricultural systems were transformed. Planets that had once been stripped of resources became centers of sustainable development. Each species contributed its unique understanding of ecological balance, creating something far more complex and sustainable than previous extraction models. As solar cycles passed, the changes became more profound. The scars of previous systems of oppression began to heal. Species that had been enemies learned to work together, to understand each other, to recognize their collective potential. In learning institutions across the galaxy, young beings would study this period of transformation. They would learn about a species that had been considered nothing more than labor, who had reimagined not just their own existence, but the fundamental nature of galactic civilization. Humanity had not just fought for their own liberation. They had shown the entire galaxy what true freedom could look like.